It's no secret that Toyota has been extremely reluctant to embrace EVs. Even though they were one of the first people to jumpstart the EV trend with the Toyota Prius, they haven't been as enthusiastic about going fully electric. They were even actively lobbying against EVs. In fact, they were the third biggest lobbyist against climate initiatives, only beaten out by oil giants. And this doesn't just apply to Toyota either. All of the Japanese automakers, including Nissan and Honda, have been slow to embrace EVs. And with all the EV hype over the past couple of years, it seemed like these guys were making a massive mistake. But more recently, the picture is starting to look a lot different. For starters, the EV market is crashing hard. Tesla's deliveries are down year over year, they just cut 10% of their global staff, and their stock is down 65%. But at least Tesla is already profitable and can weather the downtrend for as long as needed. Rivian and Lucid, on the other hand, are losing ridiculous amounts of money on every car they sell, and at this point, they're just trying not to go bankrupt. Even legacy automakers who took a big plunge into EVs are struggling to make it work. In fact, Ford lost $4.7 billion on EVs last year. In stark contrast, things are going better than ever for Toyota. They just put in a record high in terms of vehicle sales, coming in at 11.23 million cars sold in 2023. And their fundamentals are looking quite healthy as well. In fact, over the past 12-month period, they netted a total of $31.8 billion. For perspective, that's more than double Tesla's earnings, and even more than Nvidia's earnings. Considering these stellar fundamentals, I don't think you'd be surprised to hear that Toyota stock is making new all-time highs, while the rest of the automotive industry is getting crushed due to high interest rates. So, was Toyota right about EVs all along? Was it just a short-term bubble that Toyota masterfully avoided? Or are we just going through an EV slump after which Toyota is gonna get destroyed? Well, let's find out. If you're interested in deeper dives, interviews with insiders, and exclusive tech analysis, consider subscribing to our free weekly newsletter. But anyway, with the EV market in shambles, it seems like Toyota was a prophet who saw through all the hype, and to a degree they were. In fact, Toyota's former CEO, Akio Toyoda, publicly stated that EVs are, quote, overhyped, and that the lack of supporting infrastructure and high cost would hinder their adoption. But this doesn't tell the full story, as Toyota's stance on EVs isn't fully analytical. It's actually quite a bit biased, and to understand this, we have to first take a look at Japan. As an island state, one of the biggest historical struggles for the country has been energy production. Japan doesn't have any crude oil or natural gas pipelines, nor do they have any of these resources at home. So almost all of Japan's energy consumption has to be shipped into the country, and that's not an exaggeration. 94% of Japan's energy literally comes from cargo ships filled with crude oil and other fossil fuels. And things are so unstable that Japan often has to ask their citizens to conserve energy to avoid blackouts. But if energy is so hard to come by in Japan, why was Toyota one of the first automakers to embrace EVs? Why was the Toyota Prius launched way back in 1997? Well, historically, Japan's energy dependence wasn't nearly as dire. While the majority of Japan's energy has come from imports for decades now, it was nowhere near 94% energy dependency. And for a hot minute, it seemed like Japan was actually gonna escape their energy dependence due to clean energy sources and, more importantly, nuclear power. Back in the 90s and 2000s, Japan was one of the world's biggest nuclear powerhouses. During the peak of it, roughly 1/3 of Japan's electricity generation was thanks to nuclear power. And this trend is what prompted Japanese automakers to invest in hybrid vehicles. It seemed like pivoting cars to electricity was a surefire way to further minimize oil imports and maximize Japan's energy independence. But then, things went wrong. Really wrong. In 2011, a massive tsunami and earthquake struck Japan, leading to the Fukushima nuclear disaster. 154,000 people had to be evacuated, and Fukushima is to this day the second worst nuclear disaster in history, only beaten out by Chernobyl. Naturally, Japan cut back on nuclear power substantially over the following years. In fact, in 2014, nuclear power accounted for 0% of Japan's electricity generation. things have somewhat recovered since then, but it's only a fraction of where Japan was before the incident. So from an energy dependence perspective, it no longer mattered for Japan whether cars run on gas or electricity, as both have to be imported anyway. This stalled Japan's EV spirit, but it didn't quite turn the country against EVs altogether. What turned the country against EVs was the discovery of a new fuel source: hydrogen. It turns out that the ocean floor surrounding Japan is filled with a substance called fire ice, and each cubic meter of fire ice can produce 160 cubic meters of methane gas, which can then be turned into hydrogen. Yeah, that right there is why Japan has become so obsessed with hydrogen. In 2017, they became the first country to create a national hydrogen strategy, and they have since committed to betting 15 trillion yen on hydrogen efforts. As Japan's largest company, Toyota is naturally doing everything they can to promote this national vision. This includes lobbying against EV initiatives, shying away from EV production, and throwing shade at EVs every chance they can. Conversely, they're doing everything they can to promote hydrogen car adoption, including giving them away for nearly free. Take the hydrogen Toyota Mirai, for example. Normally, this car retails for $66,000, but just a few months ago, Toyota was offering a $40,000 discount, 0% financing, and $15,000 worth of free hydrogen. This meant that you could walk away with this car for just $11,000 at the end of the day. So, as you can see, Toyota wasn't employing some 200 IQ strategy by avoiding EVs. They were simply leaning on promoting something else that would benefit the country way more. And it just so happens that consumers ended up on the same page for completely different reasons. Toyota is no doubt late to EVs. In fact, they didn't even introduce their first mass-market EV till mid-2022. For perspective, Toyota started selling the hydrogen-based Mirai way back in 2014. But while Toyota shied away from full-on EVs, they never dropped the ball when it came to hybrids. They continuously built upon the technology and success of the Prius, and what was once seen as a geeky car has turned into one of the hottest products within the automotive market. Not the Prius specifically, but hybrids in general. In fact, in 2023, hybrid sales were up 76% compared to 2022. And when you peel back the layers regarding consumer concerns and fears when switching to full-on EVs, this makes perfect sense. For starters, you'd never have to charge a traditional hybrid. The battery is small enough that it can be charged purely using regenerative braking. And this energy can then be used to vastly improve the vehicle's energy efficiency to 45 to 50 miles per gallon. But the traditional hybrid isn't what's really popping off. That title actually goes to a much more modern style of hybrid, the plug-in hybrid. If you're not familiar with plug-in hybrids, they're basically EVs that can also be powered by gas. They generally have relatively small batteries that are only able to power the car for 25 to 50 miles, but for most people, that's more than enough for their daily commutes. This means that they're able to fully rely on electricity for transportation on a day-to-day basis. And the best part is that they never have to deal with range anxiety. If they forget to charge the car one day or have a longer trip for some reason, it doesn't matter because the moment that the battery runs out of juice, the car will simply switch to running on gas, leading to extraordinary range numbers. In fact, the average plug-in hybrid comes with a range of 400 to 600 miles. As we said, it's literally the best of both worlds, and that's why last year sales for plug-in hybrids increased by 83%, while sales for regular EVs only grew by 21%. And can you guess who's leading the plug-in hybrid market? Well, it's actually the Chinese automakers and more specifically BYD, but when it comes to Western markets, the leader is of course Toyota. And that's largely thanks to other legacy automakers and startups going all in on EVs. In fact, many legacy automakers made it a point to skip past hybrids like GM. At the time, it seemed like the forward-thinking strategy, but unfortunately, consumers haven't adopted EVs as quickly as expected. And as such, GM recently announced that they're actually gonna backtrack on their hybrid stance. It's a similar story with Ford. Till recently, Ford was betting big on EVs, but now they're delaying their big EV investments and focusing on converting their entire lineup to hybrid. EV-only companies like Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid obviously don't have this option, which is likely going to make these upcoming couple of years rather rough for these companies. That's why Rivian and Lucid stocks are making new all-time lows day after day, and why Tesla has shed nearly $1 trillion worth of market cap. So was Toyota right about EVs all along? Well, the answer is yes and no. Toyota was not exactly right about EVs, as it's highly unlikely that people will switch to hydrogen vehicles or stick with hybrids indefinitely. EVs are still the inevitable future, but what has become abundantly clear is that the adoption curve isn't gonna be anywhere near as fast as EV enthusiasts were hoping for. And initiatives like this that are pushing for all new lightweight vehicle sales to be zero emission by 2035 are simply not realistic. The bottom line is that the hassle of EVs is a bigger concern for the average person than EV makers expected. And just because new EVs cost the same as new ICE vehicles doesn't mean that people are immediately willing to switch. More times than not, they're worried about charging times and charging infrastructure and range anxiety and cold weather. Obviously, these concerns will be addressed with time, but in the meantime, the average person isn't willing to make the jump directly to an EV. They'd much rather buy a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid. This is largely true for even EV enthusiasts who generally own a gas car as well. Toyota partially saw these concerns ahead of time, and they were partially blinded by the country's enthusiasm for hydrogen, but the one good move they made was not to ditch hybrids. This has put Toyota in a strong position within the current EV environment and gives them plenty of time to pivot to EVs. When you zoom out though, none of this is really surprising, and I think this Reddit comment really summarizes the situation well. Toyota isn't late to EVs, they're doing what they always do. You've never had a new tech in a Toyota, you've had a 10-year-old tech that will never fail. Toyota has never been in the innovation business, they've always been in the commoditization business. They specialize in bringing developed automotive technology to consumers with better affordability and reliability than anyone else. In fact, they weren't even early to hybrids. Hybrids have been around since 1899, so the Prius was actually 100 years late to the scene. But that didn't prevent Toyota from becoming a leader anyway, because they were still early from a broad market adoption standpoint. EVs only account for 1% of all vehicles on the road today in the US. So it may very well turn out that Toyota is actually early to the EV market as well. And their decision to hold off on EVs may turn out to be the right choice, but only time will tell. If you're interested in having companies pay you, check out our bond investing platform Silo in the description below. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.